this beautiful evening. And before we get started, I am going to ask Mr. Bob to do a little bit of an introduction and talk a little bit about our church here, this beautiful church. So thank you.
Good evening, folks. So I want to do a little housekeeping before we get anything really started. I want you to make sure you know where the exits are in case we have any emergencies. We have the doors here, there, in the courtyard. Restrooms are through the double doors to the left-hand side. With all that done, I got my speaking notes, so this won't take long. All right. There. I got 3 sets of 3s, and I found some things out about data centers here, and I wanted to share it with you because I'm not sure if it took me this long to figure it out. Maybe not all you know it, but you can't tell the players without a program. We have 3 distinct entities out here at the East Elko site. We have Catellus, who basically bought the property, cut it into lots, and are selling it. Then we have people like Rowan and Aligned that buy lots, put up a shell building, own it, and then they lease it out. All right. So the end user is not Catellus, it's not Rowan, it's not Aligned. Some of the end users are Amazon. They're here tonight. Those are the people that all the questions that I have heard over the last 2 years between here, the school, and downtown Frederick should be answered now because you have the end user, and that's what everyone has been working towards. Amazon does the build out. Amazon does the diesels. Okay. So that's where the players are, right? The next thing is the church has been lobbying with the one that would listen to have informational, educational meetings. I'm hoping tonight is one of those meetings where we all get to ask questions, we all get answers, we look for solutions because that's what we want. All right. If this is a successful meeting in everyone's opinion, we would like to do the same thing for water and sound. So that everyone can walk through, understand how it's been designed, what it's been designed to, and answer and educate all of us on how that was done. So that we all understand and tweak it if we have to. You may bring up some points that weren't addressed, but being an engineer, we like to be solution driven. All right. And the last thing I want to do is ask the Lord to make it an informative, cooperative, and a productive meeting. So I will turn it over to Shannon. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, folks. My name is Shannon Heafy. I'm the Air Quality Permits Program Public Participation Coordinator. We are holding this meeting this evening to learn about the Amazon air quality application. So I'm going to be reading this because I've got a bunch of stuff to say. My apologies for reading. Okay, also here from the department is Ms. Sunny Sarasak. She's our program manager. Ms. Janae Mendez, a senior engineer with the Technical Support Division, and Ms. Tracy Leeser, regulatory and compliance engineer with the Combustion and Metallurgical Division. Mr. Rob Karate from Amazon Data Services and Ms. Susan Barnes of Trinity Consultants will be representing the applicant tonight. So I want to thank you out, first of all, for coming out. This is a hybrid meeting, so we have folks we have quite a few people who are participating online tonight with all of you here. So I'm going to be asking everyone to be a little aware that they have to hear what we're saying. So I'm going to ask people not to like talk over each other, to let the Amazon folks do their whole presentation, because then I'm going to invite questions. And what I'm going to do, you have to move. I'm sorry, sir. These are all reserved. I have 5 seats up here, and what we're going to do is call people 5 at a time to come and sit until I can have you come up and ask your questions. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the people online. We'll give them 5 people a chance to speak as well. There is a presentation. Please look at these monitors on either side. And at the very bottom is my contact information. I say that because if you haven't taken a card, which is also out there, if somebody cannot answer a question tonight, grab my card, make sure you have my email, send it to me in writing, and we're going to get the questions answered for you the best we can. It just, if we can't answer tonight, it's going to get answered quickly. So now I have to go through the rest of this. Sorry. Okay. Excuse me. So tonight's informational meeting is your opportunity to ask questions of the applicant regarding their proposed project. Representatives from both Amazon Data Services and the department's Air Quality Permits Program are here to answer your questions. Before we get started, a few housekeeping rules to ensure that the meeting runs smoothly so that the public participating both here and online have an adequate opportunity to ask their questions, because there's a lot. But first, the representatives from Amazon are going to do a presentation. It's available, the people online are going to see it as well as you folks here. And following the presentation, like I said, we'll open up the floor to invite questions. Second, this is an informational meeting, not a hearing. So this is not formal testimony. This is strictly here to ask questions and hopefully get the answers this evening. So you're free to ask the questions of the applicant and the department. And like I said, we'll respond as best we can. And again, if we don't have an answer tonight, please send me an email and I'll make sure that we get the questions answered the best we can as quickly as we can for you. And there's a 3-minute clock, by the way. Sorry, I should have said that earlier. So there's a 3-minute clock for each one to make their statements. And then as we go through the thing, if we have more time, I hope, then people can come back up and ask additional questions or add to their questions. And if we run out of time, again, take my email, send me as many emails as you want to with other questions you might come up with, and I'm happy to receive them. We document them all. We're going to be reviewing everything, and then we'll get the answers to you. So let's see, did I miss anything important? No. Okay, so I did that part. Okay, so I normally do this with very large crowds. Again, I'm just going to ask that nobody speaks over anyone so that everybody can hear what the question is, what the answers are. And if somebody has asked your question, you are more than welcome to come up and ask it again or ask a different way to get more information. That's not a problem at all. We're just going to stick to the 3-minute limit. Yes. And then part of that also is because we're limited with our time, no applause. I'd love to hear it. I think it'd be great. Wish it was for me. But in between when people are asking, please, let's leave the time for the questions if you can do that. So I'm going to turn it over to Rob, and he's going to start the presentation. And when we're done, I'm going to invite our elected officials to come up and talk. And then I'll open it for the other folks who've signed in.
Maybe, there we go. Hey, there we go. Hey everyone, Rob Karate with Amazon. As mentioned, gonna walk you, gonna walk, usually the booing doesn't start until after is usually the thing. So gonna walk you through a little bit about our project here. I'm gonna be joined in this presentation with Susan. She's our national air quality expert from Trinity here in Frederick. So she's going to walk you through part of the air quality portions of things, and then happy to answer as many questions as we possibly can. As Shannon mentioned, there are going to be questions that candidly I'm not qualified to answer or I'm not expert enough to answer. Commitment I'm going to make to all of you tonight is that if you send in your questions, we're going to do our best to make sure they get answered as quickly as they possibly can. We know folks have a lot of questions, and that's okay. And I'm going to apologize in advance for the people at home seeing the back of my bald head. I'm going to do my best to do a little bit of that, and we'll do what we can. All right, Sana, if you click through to the next slide. Where's Sana? Where's she at? Hey, there we go. Okay, so quick overview in terms of my name is Rob. So quick overview in terms of what we're going to be talking through tonight. Talking through what is a data center. I know that sounds really silly. Everyone in the room knows what a data center is, but there's often a lot of misinformation around what data centers do, what kind of buildings are considered data centers, all that kind of thing. So we're going to talk through that. We're going to talk through water and energy usage and environmental stuff. Then we're going to talk through specifically air quality and what is in our permit and what we are requesting in terms of a permit for this thing. That sounds right. We got a little tappy thing going on. That's okay. Then we're going to talk through construction and community engagement, after which we'll get to folks' questions. So Sana, if you could click through to the next one, please. All right, so what is a data center? Some misconceptions around what a data center is, what it isn't. What's fundamental to understand is that data centers are what makes most of modern life possible, right? When we think about things like checking your bank account balance or answering email or frankly, Google Maps trying to get you here around the traffic that was on 70 today. All of that is stuff that happens in a data center. Now, historically, computing would happen in smaller, basically you'd have a closet or a room or a separate building for your business. Increasingly, that computing was centralized, and there's a whole bunch of really complicated engineering involved, but functionally, when we talk about the cloud and what cloud computing is, we're talking about centralized IT that makes most of what happens today possible, right? So that's part of it. AI is part of the story too. We can talk about that. That gets a lot of the headlines. But one of the things that gets missed often is that these buildings, which are fundamentally highly engineered buildings that are full of computers that are networked in with one another and make this kind of centralized computing possible. That's what we're talking about. It's what helps us stream stuff. I'm going to go back to my hotel room and watch Netflix. That's all made possible because of cloud computing. Next slide, Sana. Okay, so the question of why Frederick County and why this site in particular, okay? So when we think about how to look for a site that's a good fit for a data center, we look at a bunch of things. One of the things we look at is existing power infrastructure, right? So where are there existing transmission lines? We look at things like water infrastructure. We look at how the land is zoned and how it isn't zoned. We then look at what kind of land is available. And I'll say that one of the big misunderstandings around data centers nationally is that any plot of land is a good fit for a data center, that these things can come anywhere. And that's not true for a bunch of reasons. But the other reason that it's not true in particular here in Frederick County is that, as I'm sure everyone in the room knows, the county passed an ordinance last year that really restricts where data centers can be built in Frederick County. Okay. So in terms of what kind of land is available for data center development in the county, this plot of land is land that was zoned appropriately for it and met a number of technical specifications in order for us to be able to build a data center here on this former Catella site. We click through to the next slide. All right, so I know that this is not the world's biggest monitor. The one thing I'm going to say here is that for the folks online, you're seeing it. By the way, this is so one of the things that we have here too is that the department has put this PowerPoint online, so you can go back and reference it later. But in terms of what is here, this is what the data center campus is going to look like from above. And what you see here is that data centers are made up of a number of different buildings. The buildings that are sort of most prominent are the data center buildings themselves. So you can see here, they're labeled as data center buildings 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 on this particular campus, right? Then there are a number of smaller outbuildings. So you'll see they're labeled here, security building, water building. And then the reason we're here tonight is to talk about the emergency generators, right? And you can see that they're labeled right here. I understand. I can move this way. So, ma'am, I understand. I'm here to talk about this particular campus, which is what we are here to get a permit for through MDE. This is the process for it. And this is what this particular campus looks like from overhead. So I understand there are questions, and I understand people have comments and questions. And as Shannon said, we are here to both listen to your comments, which are really important, and we're here to answer the questions best we can. And I want to hear all of them, including the comments that aren't particularly like nice towards me or Amazon. That's okay too. I want to hear all of it. Really, really, I promise. And I won't go anywhere until everyone has finished with their comments and their questions. I promise. Okay. So when we look at this from an overview, I think there are a couple of things that are worth just double clicking on. When we look at how our emergency backup generators are placed and engineered, one of the things that we do think about, and we're going to talk about this here in a little while when we talk about the actual air permit and how often these run, but the goal is to have the generators as screened as possible and in between the buildings as possible, rather than being on the outside of buildings. Because that matters from an engineering perspective, it matters from a sound perspective, and there are a bunch of other engineering reasons why. But we thought it was important that you see the overhead schematic of what's here. There are also, again, the permit is really detailed in terms of where these are, and we're going to get into that. But we wanted you to see from an overhead perspective, and they're labeled as emergency backup generators, and we're going to talk about this a little bit. Emergency backup generators are exactly what they say, right? Maryland, as a state, has very significant restrictions on what you can use emergency backup generators for statutorily. And we can talk about it, but it's really restricted. So we'll talk about it, but that's what the overhead schematic looks like. Sana, would you click through to the next one, please? Oh, yeah, please. Yeah. Sana, could you go back real quick? Yeah, no, I get it.
Try to blow it up.
No, that's good. And again, these slides are also available online. I believe the department posted them. So they're there for you if you want to look at them later. But if anyone needs to come up and take a photo now too, that's okay.
Thank you. Yes, the slide deck is going to be added to the docket online tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
I'll have it ready to go for tomorrow morning. So you would go on our MDE website to the air quality tab, go to air permits, you scroll down nearly to the bottom, and it will say alternative NSPS. Don't worry about it. It's a table. You'll see Amazon, and then you'll see the docket. And we're adding to it each time we have something, like this slideshow, as we progress through do the process. This will all be, added more. That doesn't make sense. I'll be adding to it as we go through the process. So if you have trouble getting hold of it, it won't come up for you, or you're having trouble locating it, again, just give me a holler, and I will make sure I get a copy to you. Just email me. So sorry to interrupt.
No, it's an important interruption. All right, sorry, go ahead, Zana, click through to the next one. So we wanted to provide this to show what this particular campus is going to look like from the road. Now look, these are functionally, and I don't like lying about this, right? Data centers are an industrial use. They're an industrial building. They're permitted as such. And when you look at what they're going to look like, so when you look at it, what we're trying to do here is we're trying our best to provide as much screening as we possibly can from the road. And so we're trying our best to provide as much screening from the road, and these are mock-ups of what it'll look like once it's completed. We're happy to talk about it, but we wanted to make sure we were providing that. Go ahead and click through to the next slide, Sonny. Okay, so another hot topic that candidly is not part of this permit, right? As a reminder, this permit is an air quality permit for backup diesel generators, but the department felt, and we agreed, that it was important that we talk about some other things too, and to do our best to answer those questions preemptively. And then again, to answer questions as much as I can here. And then I will be the first to tell you that my water expertise, it goes to a certain point, and then there are people much smarter than I am. So we will do our best to answer those questions too. But preemptively, couple of misconceptions around water use on this slide and the next slide. But let's talk about this slide for a second. So big picture, look, Amazon has a commitment to water positivity, to water quality. That feels a lot like corporate speak. And there's numbers on here that are accurate and that feel very guy giving you a bunch of numbers because it's a guy giving you a bunch of numbers, but they matter, okay? So the first thing to understand is that we pay for all of our water and sewer upgrades for any facility that we're gonna operate. And our goal anytime we come into a community is to have no impact on that community's water, including things like water pressure, water quality, anything like that, okay? So first and foremost, that's the goal and that's the commitment. When we think about how our facilities are engineered and how they use water, when you compare our facilities to other data center facilities within the industry, our facilities tend to use a lot less water. And we're going to talk about the engineering behind that in a minute, but that's an explicit goal. And it's worth double clicking on because you can engineer for all kinds of different potential outcomes with these buildings. One of the things that we have tried hard to engineer towards an outcome, this is my fault. It really is. One of the things we've tried hard to engineer towards an outcome is to use as little water as possible. Sonny, can you click through to the next slide, please? So it's about 2.4 times less than industry averages. And when we think about what an average data center uses in a year, you're looking at about the amount of water for an Olympic-sized swimming pool. So it's about that, give or take, which again, to some people feels like a lot of water, to others it doesn't. There's a lot of misinformation out there about water. We can talk about why that is. I think a lot of it is well-intentioned, but there's a lot of misinformation. When we think about how our data centers use water, this is primarily how we're using water. And if anyone can't see, I've got a large head, so just let me know and I'll duck and weave. That's fair. It's a little bit my head. That's fair. And again, so what we're looking at here is when we think about how we do our cooling system. If you think about when you use your laptop, right, and your laptop gets hot on your lap when you use it for a long time, fundamentally, and I'm way oversimplifying, when you have large banks of, frankly, high-powered processing computers that do the kind of cloud computing that's necessary to do all of this stuff, the computers tend to get fairly warm. Now, I'm saying fairly warm, I'm generalizing, they tend to get pretty warm. So our goal is to make sure that these computers are as cool as possible. There's a bunch of reasons for that. They're more efficient when you run them cool. But the question always, and this comes back to water usage and it comes back to energy usage, is the question is, how do we engineer for that? Yeah, okay. There are two types of cooling when it comes to data centers that we use, okay? And this is a system that it's not kind of two different systems. Think of it as one system, but the system does two different things. Most of the time, and I'm talking about here in this climate, right? Here in Maryland, in Virginia, this part of the world. This is not the same in every part of the world. There are data centers in other parts of the world that have to be cooled differently because of climate. But when we think about our particular data centers as they are engineered specifically for here in Frederick County, here in Maryland, here in Virginia, let's call it the Mid-Atlantic, although we know Maryland is its own thing within the Mid-Atlantic, but like for here, 96% of the time, we're able to use what's called free air cooling, okay? That's air comes in, we suck it in from outside, and we run the air over our computers, and that gets them cool enough, okay? That's most of the time here, because believe it or not, it doesn't get hot enough for us to need to use the second kind of cooling, which is direct evaporative cooling. Now, it works sort of the same way, right? And the schematic is, again, it's up here, it's small, and I'm sorry that it's small. But it basically works the same way. Air comes in, but instead of just being a regular filter, it's a filter with water, and the air passes over that, and the water is used, and it creates cool air to go towards the servers, Okay. Now, there's a bunch of reasons for this, but one of the reasons why we engineer our systems this way is that compared to something like a closed loop water system, which is something that's been getting a lot of press recently, in and of itself are not bad systems. I'm not here to bash closed loop water systems. I'm not. But for these particular systems, one of the reasons we do it this way is because it actually lets our buildings be more energy efficient than other data centers, right? So this engineering is for this. And overall, and again, you all have specific questions about this community, and I get that, but I think it's worth noting, and the reason we put it in the slide, we're going to return more water to the communities that we operate in than we use for our direct operations this year. We have a water positivity goal. There are places where we return more water, places where we use more, and that's a big picture goal, and that's why I'm caveating it as a big picture goal. It's both a goal and a reality, in all fairness, but the important thing to understand here is that big picture, when it comes to water, is that these facilities use a lot less water than you think. They do use water. I'm not going to stand here and say they don't, but they use water, and we're committed to making sure that we're paying for our water infrastructure and that we're paying for our water, because it should not have an impact on the people that live near the data center or live anywhere in Frederick County. Next slide, Sana, if we could. Okay, so energy is another big topic. Let's see if this fixes it a little, sort of. Okay, energy is another big topic. This comes up a lot, and there are a bunch of reasons for it. This is one of those issues where, to be totally candid, I know people have strong feelings about it, and there's a certain amount of, I could stand up here until next year, and I probably wouldn't be able to convince a number of you when it comes to energy, and that's okay. I'm going to tell you the facts that we understand at Amazon, and that as we think about these things, how we think about energy. So, a couple of things. When we think about the rising cost of energy, I'm not going to stand here and tell you that your energy bills haven't been going up, because everyone's has, right? That would be really silly for me to stand here and say that. The question, and I think it's the operative question, is what is causing those energy bills to go up? So one of the things that we did was we commissioned a study, an outside study from a group called E3, and we asked a bunch of questions, but there are two questions that I think are really germane to this conversation within this community, because we're building data centers in your community. The first question is, does Amazon pay for the power that it uses and pays for the full cost of service of its power? Or put another way, is Amazon paying its fair share? Okay. Now, we know that there are a wide range of opinions on it. We know a lot of people don't believe that to be the case. The study that we commissioned showed that we are paying for our cost of power, and that we are not passing on the cost of that power to other ratepayers. The other thing the study found, though, and I think this is worth thinking about, because there's an easy story to tell, right? The easy story to tell is when data centers come to a community, people's power bills go up. But when you look nationally at the places where people's power bills are going up the most, it's actually in communities and in states that have not seen most of the data center investment in the United States. So you look at places like North Dakota or Maine or California, all places that candidly are not data center hotspots. They're just not. And those places have seen their power bills go up. And again, their power bills have gone up the most for a wide range of reasons. And I'm not going to sit here and say there's one particular reason why your power bill is going up and that here's who you can blame, because frankly, that wouldn't be honest. So what I can tell you honestly, and what we wanted to tell you tonight, is that from what we've seen, and we have the report, it's published online, you can dig into it, there's a lot of really good data, but functionally, our belief is that we are paying for the cost of our power, that we are not passing on those challenges and those costs to residential ratepayers. I'll add here that in Maryland recently, both last year and this year, the General Assembly passed 2 different laws that very explicitly put data centers into a new rate class. Okay? And what that means, for those of you who don't spend your time, and thank goodness most of you don't spend your time doing this because it's a tough way to spend a day, but you can watch Public Service Commission hearings all day until you have less hair than I do. And what you will see increasingly, okay, there's what's called a large load tariff proceeding that's happening right now. And what the General Assembly has instructed the Public Service Commission to do is to put us, data centers, into an entirely different rate class with an entirely different cost structure that very explicitly does not allow them to put our costs onto you residential ratepayers. That's not something that we did. It's something the General Assembly did 2 years in a row now. So they're separate. Yes, they're separate, but the General Assembly has instructed the Public Service Commission to do what it is allowed to do under its authority, which is to set rates and to make sure that those rates are not passed on to residential ratepayers, that those costs are not passed on to residential ratepayers. So again, we have another thing here, right? The PUE. Look, I'm not going to bore you guys with a bunch of PUE stats. That PUE is power usage effectiveness. It is a metric by which we measure the efficiency of data centers and other industrial buildings like this. Look,
How much money is Bezos?
what they want to believe. PUE is something that's measurable. And what we found is that our facilities are not only among the best in the industry at being energy efficient, but they're better than the industry average. Again, does that make anyone in this room feel better? I don't know. Probably not. But we were asked to talk about it, and I want to be honest with you all about the data that we have available to us so we can talk about it. Sandra, next slide, please. All right, last thing here real quick. Again, big picture. Amazon as a company has a whole bunch of big environmental commitments. Again, for you all here, I don't know how much solace this provides, but I think it's important to talk about. And one of the things that I think it's important to talk about is in the context of how it is computing services are provided to customers. Not just large customers, but also the services you use every day. So 15 years ago, 20 years ago, if you were utilizing a service that needed some kind of compute power, you were utilizing that service usually on what was called an on-premises system, right? Where the computer, the actual hardware that you would need to process what you needed to process was on site. Now, I'm not going to get into why this is a better way of doing it than that, but the one thing I'm going to point out is that one of the big challenges with on-prem workloads, as they're called, on-premises workloads, where you have the hardware on site in a little closet or in a little shed or in a building next to your building, is that these things are tremendously inefficient when it comes to energy usage. Now, our data centers use a lot of energy in one place. I won't deny that. But when you think, when you zoom out from a 30,000-foot view in terms of which is the more energy efficient choice, because the truth is, everyone, myself included, I use Google Maps to get here, right? And they're a competitor, but they're good. And there's no Amazon Maps, so I use them, right? No one wants to not be able to check their bank account balance online or to stream Netflix or to use Google Maps or any of that stuff, okay? So no one wants to not be able to do that. And the choice then isn't between, is there no computing power or are we doing data centers? The choice is actually different. The choice is between on-premises workloads and cloud computing. And what we've found is that when you move on-premises workloads to large data centers, which is what we build, they are tremendously more efficient. Again, this does not fit an easy narrative, okay? It's kind of a crummy thing and it feels both not true and it feels wrong. But it's true. The data's there. If you give me the choice between processing something on premises and processing it in a large facility for a whole bunch of reasons having to do with engineering and scale, your carbon footprint of these things is much lower. And that's just a fact. The other thing, and again, some folks care about this, some folks don't. I come from the renewable energy world before coming to Amazon, so it matters to me, but I know not everyone does. So I'll just say that we are usually the world's largest, and if not the world's largest, we're usually one of the world's like 3 largest buyers of renewable energy. We build and buy more renewable energy projects than anyone, more than governments, more than other companies. If there's solar or wind or nuclear, which is carbon-free, people have different definitions of whether it's clean, but it's good carbon-free energy. We build and buy and support more of that than anyone else in the world. For some folks, who cares? For other folks, that matters, so I want to make sure I was saying it out loud. Sana, if you could go to the next slide, and then I'm going to turn it over to Susan. Again, as a reminder, Susan's going to talk for a little bit. Susan is our national air quality expert. She is with Trinity Consultants here in Frederick. She's going to talk a little bit about what we're permitting and about the diesel gens, and then we're going to come back, talk a little more, and then answer some of your questions. Susan?
Okay, as Rob said, I'm Susan. I think everybody can hear me. So I'm going to talk through what is in the actual air permit application, which is available on MDE's website, the same place where you will find the slides tomorrow morning. So one thing to note for local air quality, we are in Frederick County, Maryland, which is delegated as a moderate non-attainment area for ozone. Reason this is important is because we're talking about what makes ozone, which is NOx and VOC. However, that doesn't mean the air quality here is bad. Actually, the reason that it is considered a moderate non-attainment area is because it's called part of what's the ozone transport region. The ozone transport region is the entire northeast of the United States. It starts in Northern Virginia and goes all the way up to Maine. And the idea is that ozone is not really a localized problem. It travels up to those smaller states and they can't necessarily fix the problem by themselves. So everywhere in the Northeast is considered a moderate non-attainment area. Because Frederick County is local to DC and DC's had some historic ozone issues, the levels here are even lower. So while the ozone transport designation means that you can have 100 tons per year of NOx of air emissions coming out of stacks, in Frederick County, that's actually only 25 tons per year. So when you're looking at the data centers in Northern Virginia, if you go and look at their permits, which go through a similar process as this, although without any public comment in Virginia, there is a 100 ton per year cap that those facilities generally take. In Frederick County, we're looking at 25 tons per year. So we're looking at a quarter of the air emissions, and that's a maximum number that was for this site. That's what Amazon is asking to be able to emit. On an actuals basis, the emissions are generally much lower, which has been seen in Virginia. Maryland doesn't quite have the history on it yet. Can you go to the next slide? Okay, so single source determination. In terms of air quality, there are 2 completely separate facilities for Amazon. So the BWI 150 air permit was issued earlier this year, and this is for a separate air permit. This is the IAD 534 campus. The reason that they're considered separate is based on EPA rules of how you determine what's on a single air permit. What is a facility? So there are 3 criteria that all facilities in the US need to go through to determine if they get 1 permit or if they get 2 permits. Amazon meets the first 2. The 2 data centers are owned by the same company. They are owned by Amazon. They belong to the same industrial grouping, basically meaning they do the same thing. They're both data centers, but they fail to meet the last one. These sites are over half a mile apart, more than double what's required to not be considered one facility. They also will operate as totally separate facilities. Got their own security, their own people, their own generators, their own buildings. Everything is separate. They don't depend or rely on each other or share any materials back and forth. So knowing that this was going to come up, Amazon did submit a single source determination actually before the permit application ever went to MDE. So that was submitted to MDE. MDE reviewed these 3 criteria and agreed that they should be considered separate sources. That letter from MDE is included in the permit application if you want to see it. And that's why we're here for a separate permit today that will be a separate facility. Okay, and can you go to the next slide? All right, so at this site, we're looking to permit 99 emergency generators. These generators are to provide power in the event of a power failure, to make sure that the data center can continue to work. Now, we're looking at 92 of the generators that will actually provide power to the main servers. And then there's an additional few generators which are used for that water building that Rob pointed out, a security building, and also for like things like keeping the lights on that aren't directly related to the servers. So those are the smaller generators. This is out of the air permit application, so it's already online. Again, it'll also be in the slides when you go and see it. But one of the things to note here is the emissions controls that are being put on the generators. So when we're talking about emissions for generators, we generally talk about tiers. So you'll hear terms like tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. These are EPA levels of emissions. The tier 2 being what is currently required for emergency generators for the entire US under EPA regulations. Tier 3, a little bit lower levels, and tier 4, the lowest levels. What Amazon is putting in for the 92 of the larger gens, which is over 98% of the total generating capacity from emergency generators, is what's called tier 4 compliant. So these are generators that are EPA certified as tier 2, and then we'll have emissions controls put on them so that they meet the EPA tier 4 emissions certs. And then in terms of the actual operation, I said before when we were talking about that 25 tons per year, that is the amount that Amazon could put out in their permit. But the likely average emissions on an annual basis will be less. The generators on average, as shown through Amazon data centers across the country, is less than 10 hours per year per generator. Most of that's maintenance and testing, and then the occasional emergency is also included in that number. Oh, I think that was my last slide. Yeah.
So the other thing that's worth double clicking on here, it's not on this slide, but it's important. Maryland statute does not allow for emergency backup generators to be used for demand response. They are only allowed to be used for emergency operations. So basically, if the grid goes down, we're allowed to click these on. Now, there are, and for testing. So the testing that happens, as Susan mentioned, works out, again, when you factor all of it in, it's about 10 hours a year. But one of the misconceptions, again, because Maryland is a relatively new data center market in the grand scheme of things. There are plenty of smaller data centers that exist in the state, but in terms of what get called hyperscale data centers at the size and scale that we do them, it's a relatively new industry for Maryland. So one of the misconceptions is, oh, Amazon will just want to run these all the time. Or, hey, these might be cheaper for Amazon to run, so they'll just run them when it's convenient. Or, hey, there'll be a demand response program and Amazon will be incentivized to run these instead of taking power from the grid. All of that, not the case. Now, there are data centers in the United States that are set up differently, right? They're set up with behind the meter power instead of front of the meter power. One thing, again, that's important to double click on is that in Maryland, data centers have to be connected to the grid. They have to be what's called front of the meter. Now, different people on both sides of the aisle have very different feelings about front of the meter and behind the meter data centers and what that means. But functionally speaking, for these data centers on this campus, what that means is that we can only legally operate these backup generators that we're trying to get the permit for under really limited conditions and to test them. And that, as Susan pointed out, the overall cap of what we are allowed to do is a quarter of what it would be if we were just a little ways down the road in Virginia. So that's one of the benefits of Frederick County being located where it is. And it's one of the benefits of the current regs that the state and MDE have in place. Sorry, Asana, could you click through the next slide, please? Oh, yeah. Oh, compliance. Sorry, we do need to talk about compliance. This is important.
It's a big part of the permit.
Folks, I understand. However simple the question is, and I know that there are a lot of really good ones. If we wait for the Q&A, and then, like I said, I promise you, no, not at all.
We're going to try to do our best to answer or accept everyone's questions. But as much as we can tonight, all of them that we can do tonight, and those that we cannot answer tonight, you were to send me an email and I will happily get you an answer. Excuse me?
Yeah, sorry, no, we will answer your question. All right.
Yep.
Susan, please continue.
Okay, so the compliance requirements that are in the permit, we talked about what's being permitted and what the total emissions are. So the requirements that MDE puts in the permit in order to make sure that Amazon does comply. Amazon will be tracking fuel usage, so the actual amount of fuel that is used in each of those generators. And there are limits associated with that. They're also tracking for the amount of time that each of the generators runs, and there's additional limits surrounding that as well. And then if any of these limits are approached, there's actually a 5% buffer on that. If Amazon's actuals start to get closer to the limit, there's a monthly reporting requirement to MDE to ensure that they're paying really close attention and seeing those numbers and checking all the math to make sure we're below that 25 tons per year. There's also stack testing requirements to make sure that those emission controls are working right and the emissions that are actually coming out of the generators are what is in the application. There's semi-annual reporting to MDE as well as an annual emissions report to MDE. A lot more strict requirements than you see in most data center permits.
All right. So Sana, if we could click through to the next slide, please. So, couple more things, couple more things to talk through, and then we're going to answer your questions. Okay. Real quick. We talk about construction and site design. Functionally here, the construction that's happening here, we try to do as much as we can with local companies. Right? And the important thing to understand, and again, this is big picture. Right now, there are plenty of Marylanders going to Virginia to do their jobs, to do these construction jobs in other states. Now look, that may not, folks, that may not matter to everyone, but it does matter to some folks. So I'm making sure I'm saying
And
it out loud.
gentlemen, I'm sorry, I need to interrupt really quickly. I want to remind folks that there are a lot of people online listening and trying to learn as well. They can't hear what he is saying or what anyone is saying because we're all talking over each other. So I'm going to ask for everyone to please be as respectful as possible and not talk over each other so that everybody can hear online as well as in here. Thank you.
Okay, Sana, next slide, please. All right. Again, this is something that matters because it does matter to folks in this community. All right. And it matters to folks in Maryland broadly. When we think about the importance of what data centers bring to a community, right? One of the things that matters a lot is the opportunity for workforce development, to train people for new careers, and to get people both permanent and construction jobs within these communities. So we got some stuff on here in terms of what the different roles are. If there are folks here, and there are always at least a couple in every one of these community sessions we do who are interested in these kinds of jobs, interested in getting trained for these kinds of jobs, it's something we want to make sure that we're saying because there are all kinds of different opportunities here. Son, if you go to the next slide, please. Again, just a quick rundown of the different types of roles that exist in a data center. The reason we have to point this out, folks, to be candid, is that there's a lot of misinformation out there around, oh, these buildings, you build them and then there's no one inside them and they just operate without anyone in them and they don't create any real permanent jobs. And that is not true. So these are the types of jobs that are involved in both constructing and then maintaining a data center. These are highly engineered buildings and they require specialized people to build them and to maintain them. So we run through them, but that's what it is. Next slide, Sana. Okay, and then talking real quick about community benefits and what we're doing in the community. I think it's important to point out, as Bob mentioned, everyone has a different role in this ecosystem. So the company that has been building this facility for us, it's a company called Rowan. They're a terrific national company. I know. So we wanted to talk a little bit, real quick, about, sir, I appreciate it, but we're going to answer questions. Let us finish the presentation. So real quick, there's, yeah. All right, so real quick, there's already been a fair amount of investment here in this community. We're looking forward to doing more. Next slide, please. And then again, that's fine. That's fine. Go ahead and Sana, click through the next slide. Sana, if you click through, and then that should be it. Yeah. Fine.
Gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to offer the opportunity for our elected officials to make a statement. And I would like to invite Senator Louis Young to come up first.
Thank you very much. Where do you want me? Okay, so much for my request for respect. I've been involved with data centers for well over 3 years. One of the legislators that had tried to stop the CPCN process, which created this mess we're in today. Are there any other elected officials here? Okay, good. We had a whole group outside. I'm sorry they're not here. This is the more important of the two events. That was a political rally. This is a policy issue. This is where you have your opportunity to ask questions, to share concerns, and to change policy. So this is important. I know they talked an hour. It was really frustrating, but I have to say, I do thank them for coming. I thank MDE for hosting this. There's probably other ways they'd rather spend their evening, but in the interest of transparency, in the interest of hearing community concerns, they're here. So let's be as respectful as possibly, because that way you get things done. You don't get done by yelling at people. You won't come back. That's my political advice. Okay, so let me share a couple of my concerns. And I shouldn't say my concerns. They're my constituents' concerns. I listen to my constituents. I happen to be working with a group of policy experts. One is right in front of me, former FERC engineer. There are water experts. There are other electric engineer experts. These are people that really understand this stuff. And I have tried to develop my policy agenda as well as my concerns based on this. You know, I get that we need data centers. I think most people here do, but we need to do it in a safe, healthy manner. that does
Crazy.
not endanger lives or inconvenience lives. And we need a greater level of transparency and community input than we've seen in the past. So I want to start with the health concerns, and we have not paid enough attention to this. We're supposed to ask questions. I promise I'm going to end with a question. So one of the reasons that I was one of the few elected officials to vote against the governor's bill to bypass the CPCN process is I was worried about the harmful effects of diesel generators. So I'm going to bore you with a few numbers, but they're worth repeating. You people probably know them. You might even argue with them, but I think I can substantiate them. Diesel fuel carries 23 pounds of carbon dioxide. So a 3 megawatt diesel generator operating at 75% load capacity burns 164 gallons an hour. With a regular hour-month maintenance schedule, each of the 168 generators that were originally proposed for the Quantum Loophole site would carry CO2 pollution load of 45,264 pounds a year, or 3,800 tons, just from a single facility. Now, this permit is for an additional, I've heard 99, 92 generators. So 6 generators rated at 750 kilowatts and one at 250 is the equivalent of 258 megawatts. 99 additional generators brings the site total to 365. Each must be tested once a month. So that means you're testing 8 or 9 a day. Now multiply that by all the numbers that I just stated, and that's a lot of harmful air effects. A single generator on average emits every hour almost 45 pounds of nitrous oxides and non-methane hypocarbons, carbons, 24 pounds of carbon monoxide, and 3 pounds of particulate matter. Particulate matter is tiny particles that, if ingested, can lead to heart and respiratory issues. So these 99 generators would annually contribute roughly 23,000 pounds in CO2, 53,400 pounds in nitrous oxide, 28,000 pounds in carbon monoxide, and 3,500 pounds in particulate matter. Now, here's the problem. Now, you might debate these numbers, or you might say that you're within guidelines. What are the health effects? We don't know, and that's the problem. My staff called the Maryland Health Department and said, are you working with MDE to quantify the health effects of all these toxic pollutants in the air? No, and we don't have the resources for a study. I'm sorry, that's unacceptable. So my first question is, MDE, will you please work with MDH to quantify the health risks of these numbers? It is our responsibility as elected officials and as staff to ensure the health and safety of our community. Okay, previously Frederick County agreed to a 500-foot setback from a resident's home. I have a problem with that. 500 feet? I mean, the industry standard is now becoming 2,000. I think it should probably be like more like 2,500, but I'll settle for 2,000 versus 500. And not just residents. How about schools? How about daycare centers? Okay, back to my primary concern, health and safety. A December 24 study found that pollution from data center backup generators in Virginia could cause a total public health burden of 190 million to 260 million in surrounding states. Assuming the actual emissions are only 10% of the permitted level based on the historical reports and future projections. Now that's just from Virginia. That's before we start building our own. This study, pretty reputable, completed by researchers at the University of California, California Institute of Technology, Rochester Institute of Technology. And in the study, they found that Frederick County, Maryland's health costs just from Virginia's generators is about 4.6 million. Now I'm a little less concerned about the cost than the lives. Please don't assume that. So we know that these particles are particularly harmful for children, seniors, and people with breathing disorders. Diesel engines release benzene, arsenic, and formaldehyde, which are cancer-causing pollutants. They also release nitrogen dioxide, carbon dioxide, and sometimes sulfur dioxide, water vapor, oxygen, carbon monoxide, and unburned hydrocarbons. At low concentrations, health problems such as headaches, tiredness, irritation, ears and throat, and poor memory are common, while at high concentrations, respiratory distress and death may occur. Now, I'm not making this stuff up. There are studies all over the country that document this. And
Hello.
you don't have them already? I'll be happy to send them to
Did
you.
anyone hear me?
Human
want-
exposure, I think I've talked about a lot of the effects, the lung damage, the shortness of breath, the chest pain, but also fatigue, loss of appetite, headache, irritability, poor memory, dizziness, and miscarriages in pregnant women. Prolonged and repeated exposure to diesel fumes may increase the risk of lung cancer. Generator sites are hotspots or risk zones of fine particles and noxious gases in all of the study areas that many of these studies have looked at. I've tried to lump them together because I could be talking about the health concerns for the rest of the evening. So much for that. Back to the study that you've heard about. I was the author, the primary sponsor of a study that was modeled after Virginia's study, which unfortunately they did after the fact. I was trying to do it before we had massive introduction to data centers. Looks at a couple of things: environmental effects, energy demands, and the real costs. The financial analysis needs to be done by objective individuals, not the tech council, not the entities that are doing the development. We need to know that the financial incentives that we're giving out at the state are less than what the community is investing in infrastructure, and we need an objective study to do that. As Senator Fold mentioned, the study was vetoed, we overrode it, and he told you the study was due this September. Well, that's erroneous. That was the original study before it was vetoed. What I was told is, oh, because of the veto, it set it back and you all can't work on it while we're in session. So the study is not going to be available till 2027. So of course, all the developers said, well, we can't wait. We can't wait that long. So I have been working with the 3 entities saying, we need that study now. Decisions are being made. Decisions need to be made with good information. We need to know the risks as well as the opportunities. And I have been told as recently as this week that we are looking for a new date for the study for October of this year. So I'm going to ask that we pause major decisions until this study is out. I told you I was going to ask the question. So I've probably gone on too long. I do want to give other people a chance to talk, but there are 2 more points I want to make. We need to look at emerging technologies to replace diesel generators. There are electric generators, there are battery storage, there are hydrogen generators. I'm not going to explain them. You all know what they are. Amazon has a few assets. You can invest in the emerging technologies, and I suspect you'd get a very different reception if you told this audience that you are making a commitment to invest in these emerging clean technologies and you will commit to converting to them. If you just look at the incentives that the state is giving out, the incentives are essentially covering between 55 and 65% of development costs. With that money, we could all be looking at these emerging clean technologies. So I think we need to relook our battery storage goals. We need to look at usage fees on diesel generators until we convert them to cleaner energy. We need to reject Tier 4 compliant and require factory certified Tier 4 final engines. Renewable backup alternatives, and Virginia has implemented very specific enforceable requirements for school HVAC inspections, filtration standards, and public transparency. By contrast, Maryland has general school facility and ventilation requirements, but no data center specific protections. No statewide indoor air quality monitoring, and no statutory HVAC inspection cycle. So there's another thing that we can all invest in and look at. I'd rather solve it before bringing forward a bill, but if that's how we have to do it, that's how we'll do it. So believe me, I want to work with you all. I've been elected official long enough, I think I'm on 16 years now, to know that the only way you get things done is that you work with everybody. And there are always going to be people on the extremes that are going to be unhappy. But in order to achieve some progress, you got to be willing to listen to each other and work towards compromise. So my ask is, you've heard some of my recommendations, my concerns, please consider them and please adopt some of them into policy. Thank you.
I'd like to invite Delegate Miller to come up.
Thank you. Which way are people going to be facing? Okay. I meant, which way will they be facing when they come up? Like, okay. Well, I'm gonna stand over here with them because I'm going to be speaking mainly to you all because I think a lot of you have already heard what I have to say. And this is, I will add, very bipartisan with the comments because I agreed with a lot of what the senator said. So I'm just going to go backwards order from the Maryland General Assembly. We are not powering data centers with wind or solar as much as they would like to. It's just not true. The only other feasible option to bringing your own power, which a lot of us have had bills about, to data centers are SMNRs or possibly for the generators, renewable renewable propane. Are you committed to either replacing the diesel generators as more better solutions are evolving, or where are we with SMNRs and the feasibility and the likelihood of bringing your own power, particularly to our area here? I think that would also go a long way toward our power concerns. And I did bring a bill forward already to protect our schools in this session. It was House Bill 1534. And one of those reasons is because we in Frederick County can't wait for a study. Are we going to listen to the lessons already learned from Loudon? So it was designed to mitigate a lot of these impacts on our schools. And one of my biggest concerns with the school and the new overlay is that a 75-foot high massive building could be placed within 900 feet of our schools that was built in 1965. 500 feet from houses. Carroll Manor Elementary School is the center of this community. This school is home to 21% of students with special needs, including a significant number of students with autism. They are very sensitive to vibration and noise. We know there is considerable risk of students being adversely impacted. What will be done to proactively protect our students? So with the vibration and noise, a lot of that comes from the HVAC units that are now placed higher. Sound travels further. How are we going to mitigate it, and how are you measuring it? What is the cumulative impact of the diesel generators? Is it taken into consideration across the entire campus with each decision that you all make and with each new application? What type of diesel fuel storage is necessary? That's something we haven't really been told. How much is there? And have you trained our EMS and first responders to respond to emergencies on the campus? And when will you be running the diesel generators? Will they go sequentially? I think Senator gave us a lot of information about that, but will you be doing it during school hours? And keep in mind, our schools are used a lot. Technology is constantly evolving. Footprints are getting smaller. Look at quantum computing, for instance. So what happens in 5 to 10 years if these buildings are obsolete? What happens? To our community, what happens when you no longer need them? So in 10 years or whenever that is. And then I do want to talk a little bit about your statements on energy. So you were saying about the rising cost of energy and what's causing bills to go up and paying your fair share. And hyperscale data centers have placed an exponential load demand. And because we are part of the PJM network, which does not differentiate or did not differentiate about that load demand or which state it was coming from, and nor does it take into account any generation abilities of the state or of the system as a whole. That's why we end up with all the power lines, which most of us are opposed to. The PJM wholesale electricity market has experienced an unprecedented surge in total wholesale power costs over the last 3 years, skyrocketing capacity costs and rising energy demands. That's what's showing up on our bills. And according to reports, PJM jumped to $67 billion last year, representing a 54% increase in just 1 year. The capacity market from 2024 to 2026 went from 28 megawatt day to $269.92. That hits all of us. It hits us every single day. So it's a little bit less about paying your fair share and looking at how energy is run in the state of Maryland, what we need to do to change it, because the low demand by hyperscale data centers has put us into this position. Then the other question I have a lot about the cooling and the water. A lot of my constituents have questions about the water that will be returned to the community. What will be in the water? How will it be tested? You said it should not have an impact on people that live near data centers. What if it does? What then? And then a lot of my constituents are farmers, or they're on wells, and we are in a significant drought. What then? That is their livelihood. That is their businesses. That is their homes. If their wells are contaminated with anything, that has obviously a huge and detrimental impact on them. And then, you talked about just overall, you talked about what kind of land is available. And so my question is, why the push into rural areas? That's what I'm going to leave it with. Yep. Yeah. You want to answer all my questions? Oh my goodness. All right. Well, I don't want to take away too much time from you guys. You want them answered? Do you want them to answer them now? Okay. Okay. Because I don't want to take away from you guys. Okay, so that will go into a little bit. So are you committed to replacing the diesel generators, renewable propane generators, or where are we with SMRs?
So I can answer that question honestly, but I'm not sure it's an answer you're going to love. The reality is that the current commercial construct for how data centers are financed, built, operated, and in terms of the requirements for availability, meaning the availability of generators to cycle on when we need them to cycle on and at the scale we need to cycle them on. Right now, I can only speak to what it is we are doing, which is these kinds of specific emergency backup diesel generators. What I will say is that we are interested in exactly the kinds of technologies that you all are talking about. I can't stand here and promise you that we can make a commitment to you tonight that we are going to take these specific generators that we are trying to get permitted and move
Hi, how are you?
to different. What I can say is that as a company, we are looking at these things. We are open to a conversation, not just internally
What's that?
with public policy leaders such as yourselves.
Well, you
I will
weren't
say here,
gone for
is
very
not-
long.
talking out of both sides of my mouth here.
Well, that's
These
nice.
officials
That's
are
great.
not on our side on stuff very
It's too
often.
bad you weren't
And they're on your
gone
side.
for
which is
longer.
pretty much-
Longer is always good.
But both of you have been always very respectful in your, frankly, like
So it
disagreements
was Sarah's
with-
idea to
we
go?
appreciate that. So I was just wanted to say that bit. But frankly, like the current technology is what it is. We're interested in forward-looking technology, but I can't make a commitment to you right now that we're gonna move to something different.
And then we'll get to that with the cumulative, but what about the fuel? How much fuel is stored for the diesel generators? We could skip to that one.
I think that's actually part of the permit, if I'm not mistaken. Anna?
Yeah, so this is included on the FAQ on the handout you have. Hello, can you hear me? All right. Awesome. So this is a question we predicted, and it's also FAQ number 9 on your handout. So we have a total of 4 12,000 gallon above ground storage tanks for the facility. And we also have the total number of gallons of diesel fuel. It's about 668,900 gallons that will be stored on site potentially when all buildings are in operation. I believe that answers
Okay.
your question.
Yes, thank you. And just my questions, so one of my biggest concerns, of course, is the school. and lessons learned, of course, from Loudon. So what are the plans? We have seen it be passed the buck. The buck has been passed around from the state level to the county level to the board. No one wants to take responsibility for mitigating the impacts of the school. So what are your plans to protect our students?
So again, fair question. From our perspective, we believe these sites, not just here in Frederick County, but everywhere in the country, to not pose a risk to both workers, to both the workers who are on site and to the folks who live near it, including schools. So I understand the question. Right now, our plan is to operate under the requirements that MDE and the state of Maryland have imposed on us for air permitting for these specific facilities. We are open to conversations about what else we might be able to do, but our current plans right now are to operate under the current requirements that we have under the state.
Right, and I understand that, but the building was built in 1965, so absolutely would like to take you up on that, and we can go, because I don't want to wait till 2-3 years down the road, especially with the design of this building and how close with the overlay that it is going to be put, which is going against current industry standards that are being placed all around the country. So I would like to take you up on that and go either talk to the school, visit the Board of Ed, whatever we need to do to get this done to protect our kids, because this bill will be going in every single year, whether it passes or not. I hope I can bring my colleagues alongside. I know they were very interested in it this year, or making it a local bill. So which hopefully the senator would support me on if we can't get some movement. Senator will be my cross file. So that we definitely, if we can't get it done one way. So the other one is the vibration and noise. Do you have ways to mitigate or measure, especially with the buildings now being approved for 75 feet high? So those are going to travel more because you don't have the buffer around it.
It's a good question. So when we engineer our campuses, we engineer them to be compliant with the current noise ordinance in the county where they're located. Here in Frederick County, my understanding is that the noise ordinance exists at the property boundary. And so we engineer our facilities for both sound and for when we think about things like vibration, both during the construction phase and during the operational phase, to minimize those and to stay within what is currently required under the county ordinance. If I remember correctly, I want to say the county ordinance is 60 or 65 decibels, if I'm not mistaken. 55, even better. So 55. So,
but isn't there a gap in when you actually even start measuring and how often and all that?
No, we have to be in compliance as a building that is being built and being operated within the county.
Okay.
The county ordinance is again, one of the more, I mean, nobody likes to hear this about their own community, which is fair, but like this community has some of the more strict ordinances, like 55 decibels. When you compare it to nationally, there are other communities where, frankly, the sound requirements are higher. Here, they're pretty strict.
Okay. And this one is for MDE. Are you taking a look at the cumulative impact of the diesel generators and all of that?
Okay, this question comes up a lot. Unfortunately, under the state and federal rules, under the Clean Air Act, each of these sources are looked at independently. So there is not a cumulative study. However, I know this is not just a national issue, a state issue, or a local issue. It's an agency issue. All of the state agencies are trying to work together to address all of the data center concerns. So I think there was a question about working with the Department of Health. We're also working with the Department of, the Maryland Energy Administration, the University of Maryland, et cetera, to try and understand the bigger picture of how data centers are operating. One thing I do want to note, though, is that the Department of Environment has no control as to where these data centers are allowed to be placed in the state of Maryland. There's no law, a state law that says it can't go here or there. Frederick County provided zoning approval for data centers in this area. We cannot accept applications without evidence of zoning approval. And so exactly. So the issue is that when we receive an air application, we don't accept it until it has zoning approval. And so we have zoning approval that says it can be located in this area. And so then we are obligated to review that air permit application.
About our EMS and first responders to any kind of site incidents.
Great question. And we want to help train them, and we should. So happy to have that conversation with local first responders. Happy to do it. We should.
Okay, it hasn't happened yet. They haven't
To-
asked you. I mean,
To my knowledge, it's possible we have,
Okay.
but if we haven't, I'm happy to commit to that. I think it's a critical thing.
okay. And then when will you be running when the diesel generators need to be discharged? Is it going to happen during school hours, or all at once? Is it sequential? Again, the senator gave us some facts about total hours. How is that going to be done? Because that does have a cumulative impact.
Anna, Susan?
Yeah, so our generators typically operate for less than 10 hours of a year, total testing and maintenance per generator. Typically, that's done in a 6-minute test biweekly per generator. Normally, those generators are tested once at a time. Per the current county ordinance, generator testing and maintenance can only be conducted between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. And I believe I've spoken with our operations team, they also take into account local factors such as proximity to the elementary school. So ideally, they are not testing them while they're on the playground at recess, for instance.
Well, it's an elementary school, so they're on the playground all day.
So no. That's a fair question. So the confusion there, just to clear up the confusion, didn't say they were tested 10 times a year, that they run for about 10 hours a year on average. And then when asked specifically about the testing schedule or the testing schedule for the backup generators, that's generally how they are tested in those increments at that biweekly level. And again, the county ordinance is what the county ordinance is. And again, so we have to kind of operate within the existing ordinances.
Right. And so especially around here, we are prone to storms and power outages. So in this type of area, how often are you seeing that they are running for more than just the backup?
It's when we think about the resiliency of the grid, particularly in this area, we think about the power being down to a facility at our level when power comes from a transmission line to a substation to the facility. It's a remarkably resilient area in terms of the grid. Again, when I'm not, folks, I'm not talking about the power that comes to your homes, which is a different thing. Okay. What I'm talking about is that when we engineer and we pick where it is we're going to locate sites, one of the things we think about is the resiliency of the grid and, candidly, how often it is we will have to run these generators. Because as a reminder, in this community, with the requirements that we are under, it's a quarter of how often we are allowed to run these same generators in other states. So this is a community where if your grid was not especially resilient, it wouldn't make sense for us to operate these facilities here, because once we reach this limit, this is not a limit. This isn't like when your kid asks if they can go to bed at 9 and then they ask if it's 9:30. Like, these are really, really tight limits under which we have to stay, and which we are obligated under the current statute to report to MDE what it is we're doing.
So I'm going to skip the PJM part because I understand that it's not necessarily, obviously on your shoulders, and there's not much you can do about that. But I do want, when you are talking to audience, we have a very educated audience and constituency, especially about this issue, so they understand PJM, especially with our power lines that are cutting through our wonderful county. So we really understand a lot about that and are very educated. So having that conversation and the real impacts on the cost of energy is incredibly important, because the truth is incredibly important to us, as you can see. And then, so my last question, I think that people here want to know, is what's in the water then, and how it will be tested, and what what mitigation facts do if it is hurting our wells, if there is a drought situation, if there is an impact to our local, what then? And I'm going to send I'm going to send any other questions to them, and then hopefully MDE would like them, and hopefully they will post them online.
The quick answer there is understanding is that the water monitoring happens right now. My understanding is that it happens at the facility so that we can monitor both water quality and water levels. I can check back in on exactly what that looks like when it comes to specifically water quality and anything that might be in that water. Happy to check back on it and get an answer. All right, so other questions?
We have more. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I'd like to offer, we have two more of our elected officials here this evening. We have County Councilman Donald and County Councilman McKay, and I want to see if you folks want to come up, or if you'd like to defer your time to let some more folks ask their questions. So if you want to come up, please do. If you want to defer, just let me know. Thank you very much.
I'm Jerry Donald. I'm your county councilman for this area, District 1. Thank you all for coming out. Many of us have seen each other at many of these meetings. I'm one of the two people that voted against the expanded overlay. Steve is the other one. So, but, and actually many of the things were brought up earlier, so I don't want to repeat anything. If you talked about being limited between 8 and 5 p.m. to test the diesel generators. Would you be open to testing them in times when kids are not in school? I mean, 180 days a year they're in school, but the other half of the year they're not. Could the testing be done then, so it's not as when the children are in school? And the second question, because I don't want to take up too much time, other people have many questions to ask. And this one, I guess, is a little more technical, but I went to visit a data center in Montgomery County, and they showed me how they could use something called dielectric fluid to cool. And it was very efficient. It was silent, and it was better technology, but I don't know if this is the startup costs or what the reason is, but I don't understand why we're sticking with these air and water cooled ones, but maybe you could explain that. Thank you very much.
No, Councilman, I appreciate both those questions, and my response to them will be brief and direct. So, interested to hear more about that particular cooling mechanism. I can't speak to it as a matter of expertise, but happy to hear more about it. When it comes to the question of testing diesel generators when students are not in school or at school, I'll say that we are always open to conversations with communities and community leaders about, to Anna's point, how these things are tested and when they're tested. The one thing I will say, though, as a caveat, is that the testing schedule is in part based on the ability for us to test these backup generators to ensure they have to be on a fairly rigorous testing schedule. And so often that means you can't leave them sit idle for a tremendously long period of time. But we're open to a conversation, both as it relates to the county ordinance and as it relates to finding the best times. We're open to a conversation with the caveat being that, like, our engineering teams need to make sure that they are doing what they need to do in order to make the facility operate properly, but we're open to a conversation.
Hi, so Steve McKay, Frederick County Councilman. Thank you. So I just want to start off with, it's 8:10. How long are you committed to staying here to answer their questions? And I'll just try to, all right. I'm tempted to just stop right now and let people talk, but let me just make a very brief comment, okay? And it goes back to the cumulative issue, okay? So this is the third of these hearings. There'll probably be a dozen more just like this if that overlay isn't undone, all right? In terms of the cumulative data center campus size that we're looking at here. You're looking at right now 100 generators. All right, with the overall currently approved and planned campus, the 4 data center sites, that's over 400 generators in total. That represents less than half of the buildable area in just the currently approved plan of the 1,300 acres. That takes us up to 900, maybe 1,000 generators. If that whole overlay stands, that could be 1,800 to 2,000 generators just in this local area. If every time you conduct one of these hearings, you're looking at this through a soda straw in a cookie cutter process, then honestly, I think you're doing a disservice to your careers. You're doing a disservice to your profession. I understand the legal constraint. I do. Change the law. You're one of the most important agencies in this state. Go to the governor, go to the legislature, change the law. You have to examine this from the broader perspective, the full context. Okay? I understand the limitation you have right now. Change the law. Please, we're begging you.
Hey, I did want to address that. So the Maryland, in this last legislative session, the Maryland Department of the Environment did support the Cherish Act. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, which does incorporate some cumulative impact assessments that would have granted us some authority to be able to do this. Unfortunately, the bill did not pass, but the Department of the Environment did spearhead and support that with the community. So this is not something we're doing, you know, solely and independently and not listening to all of you. We are working to try and address cumulative issues. I do just want to point out, we are not Northern Virginia. I've had conversations with Northern Virginia very regularly. They are allowing each of those facilities to not have any emissions controls and up to 100 tons per facility right next to each other. We are not, Maryland has issued the most stringent air quality permits to the data centers on the East Coast. So we are doing our best within our authority to make Amazon, to make Align, to make data centers accountable, to comply with a much lower air emission standard than Northern Virginia or any of the other states currently in our region. So that's just a point that I wanted to make. So go ahead.
There we are. Okay, I'd like to call the first 5 people up if you want to come down here and sit over at these reserved chairs. Or there. So it's Sam Newhouse, Bill Stegelman will be next, Kathy Kinsey after that, and Stephen Duckett after that. And then 1, 2, 3, 4. Who's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then Will Everett.
Please come up and have a seat.
Sam? Sure, this is an informal meeting. This is not a hearing. So we can certainly take them, but yeah. Okay.
The stated mission of the Maryland Department of the Environment is to protect and restore the environment for the health and well-being of all Marylanders. The stated vision is healthy, vibrant, sustainable communities and ecosystems in Maryland. Adding an additional 99 diesel generators to our community degrades our environment and destroys the health and well-being of Marylanders. Exhaust fumes from these diesel generators will poison the air for our children at Carroll Miller Elementary School. Amazon and the MDE representatives here will be responsible for creating and perpetuating the health crisis that will result. How much will you address the health crisis created by this overproliferation of diesel generators? How much pollution must we suffer? Battery backups and solar generation must be the solution to backup power. All other options cost Marylanders their health and well-being. Anything less is a betrayal to Marylanders. Will MDE or Amazon demand sustainable energy sources for this project? I will cite the study, The Unpaid Toll, Quantifying and Addressing the Public Health Impact of Data Centers, Yualin Han et al., same one that our senator mentioned. Quote, certain regions and communities are bearing a disproportionate share, with per household burdens exceeding those in other counties by more than 200-fold. Why does this community have to bear the majority of this health burden? Continued from The Unpaid Toll. Asthma symptom cases, among other health outcomes, will total a public health burden of hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Why must our community bear this cost? The Unpaid Toll once more. Long-term exposure to PM 2.5, even at low level, are directly linked to numerous health outcomes, including premature mortality, heart attacks, asthma, stroke, lung cancer, and cognitive decline. Are you going to prioritize the health and well-being of the residents of Maryland or pad the profits of Rowan Digital Infrastructure? You know that PM 2.5 is a no-threshold pollutant and that regulatory compliance does not imply the absence of a health risk. Why are you leaning so heavily on regulatory compliance and ignoring the health risks? The total 688,000 gallons of diesel fuel that will sit in the quantum loophole projects. Our fire stations are not, nor will they be, capable of any appropriate response. How will Maryland assist in supporting an emergency response to a 688,000 gallon diesel blaze? The fire will be hot enough to break the concrete that holds the building together, vaporizing the computer components inside and sending that poison into our air. What is your disaster response scenario for a failure of this magnitude?
So, there we go. So, again, a lot of good questions there. What I would say is, big picture, we have very specific emergency response requirements for all of our buildings. We disagree with the idea that these buildings are somehow unsafe. We believe them to be safe. We have a pretty long and extensive safety record when it comes to Amazon data centers. We understand those concerns, but functionally, we believe that these buildings are highly engineered. They have redundant safety measures built within them, both for security of the data that exists within these facilities and for the equipment itself and for the people that operate these facilities. So I understand the concern, but fundamentally, we disagree and believe that these to be safe facilities, both for the people that operate them and the communities in which they operate. I'm happy to look in to see if we have any public-facing safety reporting, but again, these facilities are, we believe, safe.
There we go. If you can find that information, would you please forward it to me? Then I can put it up on the docket and so folks can understand, see what they can find. If you have that information.
Happy to find it if we have it available. Sure.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so is Bill here? No? Okay. Oh, okay.
Okay, is this working? Good, great. So I'm going to be really brief because a lot of what I had to say has already been covered by Senator Lewis Young and by others and by Councilman McKay and Donald. I'm just going to make 3 points here. One on cumulative impact emissions. I've said this before at prior public comment hearings on earlier permits, but I believe it is really a major flaw in the MDE's permitting system that there is no requirement for a cumulative impact emissions analysis under these kinds of circumstances. And you know, regulation should require an analysis and should require the imposition of conditions that would ensure the health and safety of the neighboring communities, as well as provide some environmental protection. It's really unfortunate that the Cherish Act didn't pass this year. I think we were all really disappointed about that. And hopefully another effort will be made in that regard in the next legislative session. But I think MDE should be looking at its existing statutory authority, because I believe that that authority is there for the agency to do regulations under its existing authority that would require cumulative impact analysis. And I think, you know, the agency should do that. And there's some urgency around this because, as many of you know, 10 days ago, US DOE issued an emergency order that would allow PJM to require or authorize data centers to operate, data centers and other large facilities with backup diesel generators, to operate their diesel generators to avoid, you know, rolling blackouts. And so this is something that we have all been very worried about, and looks like it may come to pass eventually at some point in the future, that backup diesel generators will be used for peak load shading. I get that MDE's permit prohibits that. I get that EPA regulations currently prohibit their use for demand response and also for peak load shaving. But it's very concerning to me that US DOE would issue an order that it did, knowing that a sister federal agency has explicit regulations on the books
that prohibit the use of diesel generators for that purpose. So I'm just raising that issue. I think a lot of people are very concerned about what that DOE order means and what it could mean for the future. Two other points I wanted to make tonight about permit conditions that I think MDE should consider. One is the deployment of air quality monitors around the perimeter of the site and the campus, and public reporting, regular, frequent public reporting of emissions levels. And I think that would go a long way toward giving the citizens and the neighbors and the community some confidence about the air quality in the area. And then the second thing is something I think that the agency should consider, and that I would hope Amazon would consider as well, and that's a prohibition on testing and maintenance of generators on air quality code red and orange days, you know, when the air quality is already really bad. So those are my 3 points, 3 suggestions, and thank you for the opportunity.
Good evening. My name is Stephen Duckett, Frederick County resident, and I am a healthcare and public health professional. So I'm coming at it from a strictly a policy lens. So my concern is that this application is no longer occurring in isolation. Earlier this year, MDE approved another major Amazon data center generator permit in Frederick County. And in prior response documents, the department acknowledged public concerns regarding cumulative impact. So we're touching on this yet again. It's very important. So while evaluating the project, they actually used a traditional source-specific permitting framework. I take issue with this, as did many of the previous speakers. I appreciate that you have to operate within Maryland and federal regulatory requirements. However, cumulative impact principles are already recognized within broader federal environmental review practice, and agencies retain discretion. You have the ability to be able to leverage. You do not have to abide by strictly the individual permitting exceptions. What you can do is consider a broader environmental impact review, and the agency has failed to do that. From a public perspective, residents are not experiencing these as isolated projects. They're seeing multiple large-scale facilities with dozens upon dozens of diesel generators being proposed and approved within this county over and over and over again. Even when the individual facilities independently satisfy permitting requirements, questions still remain regarding aggregate emissions, overlapping testing cycles, which have not been touched on, localized air quality impacts, not touched on. We are only looking at this from a singular lens. This group of people up here, we have public health professionals like myself. We learned in our graduate programs. We know we can do better, we have to do better, and we must.
Thank you. Okay, is, good to see this person, call them up and then, yeah. Yes. Yes. Is Will Everett still here? No? Okay. Oh, thank you. Okay, the next folks I'm going to call up to come and sit, and then we're going to go and take 5 people online and then go back to you guys. So the next folks I have is, oh my goodness, somebody I can't read, sorry. Is that Kevin Settler? Forgive me if I can't read your handwriting. Milton Hallen, Casey Day, Hope Green, and Roger Cryan. And like I said, once everyone is up here and settled, we're going to go to 5 people online.
Good afternoon, folks. We're going to be transitioning to the online questions. Mr. Tom Rip, would you be able to come off mute and ask your question?
Yeah, I'm Tom Ripp. I'm retired from the US EPA, worked there for 27 years in the Office of Enforcement and Compliance Assurance. So I'm more of a compliance expert than I am.
Can we just wait? Can we just wait 1 second?
Yes.
Excuse me, Mr. Ripp. We missed out a little bit of the beginning of that. We're going to try to have you come through via mic again. If you just give me 1 second.
Okay, now who did I go? Kirsten? Kirsten? No, yeah, no, yeah, okay. Okay. Milton? Milton?
Thank you, Milton Hallen. And my comment to you all, because I think we need to reframe our thinking here and remember that. I think tonight we've had a lot of client-customer kind of relationship with MDE and Amazon Web Services, but we need to remember that we are the bosses of the MDE through elected officials. And if we think that what they are allowing the data centers to do is too much, we have the power to change it. We can do that on June 23rd, and then again in November, and we'll see how that shakes out. So, my next comment for MDE, I want to remind you that environment is in the title of your department, and your primary job is to protect the environment for all of us, because we are the bosses. And to consider, one thing we haven't heard tonight is the heat island effect and having these data centers. A lot of electricity move. Heat. It's already summer. Even though it's not meteorologically summer yet, but I want to be able to live outside and go outside most of the year. And if you have these heat islands, it can create, it can just raise the temperature 5-10 degrees, and that's already dangerous at the height of the summer. So that's another consideration in what you do. Use your authority to protect us, help us stop this data center, sorry. And I know this is supposed to be a Q&A, but I'm going to use all the Jedi power in me to say, you don't want to sell us data centers. You want to go home and re-examine your life.
How we doing?
Test. Mr. Ripp, could you please go ahead?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I was saying that I'm retired from the EPA after 27 years, pretty much working in the compliance and enforcement office. So I'm more of a compliance expert than I am permitting. I've got a lot of questions and comments that I've put into the in-call messages section. And most of them have already been asked and addressed by other people. But there are a couple things that I do want to highlight and question. And the first one is, I've looked online. The state only has one air monitor for the entire Frederick County, and it's only monitoring for ozone. So what kind of baseline is Amazon going to do prior to construction and operation of its facility for all of the criteria pollutants, so that the people can then determine what potentially adverse impact the data centers may be having once they're up and operational. A comment for the state is, under the SIP review process, when there's significant changes, the state should be reviewing its designated areas and any changes that should be made. And the state is allowed to be more broad in scope and more stringent than the federal requirements. So the state shouldn't feel compelled to just stick with the minimum standards. Question back again for Amazon is, why are you going through a synthetic minor permitting process instead of just getting a permit under Title V Clean Air Act? Because even with controls, the facility has the potential to emit greater than even 100 tons of criteria pollutants or 250 tons. And it's only a minor by accepting enforceable limits in a permit. And if you violate that permit, are you willing to accept a major status in a Title V permit under any enforcement action as judicial or injunctive relief? And why can you show how you've calculated that Tier 2 generators with add-on controls are functionally equivalent to Tier 4 generators? Why not just start off with Tier 4 generators? And also, other people have mentioned, and I'll mention it, if you're only using 10 hours of electricity a year or power outage a year, why can't you use a utility scale battery storage technology that can be recharged over time, in particular with
Your
solar
time
panels?
at this moment. Everyone else, the company, if they would like 1 minute for answer.
Shorter than a minute. I would say and appreciate the question. We believe this to be the appropriate permit based on the current standards as we examine these campuses and look at how these campuses operate. We believe a minor source permit is appropriate and that we will be within the construct of that minor source permit. So understand and appreciate the Title V question, but we believe this is the appropriate permit for us to apply for, and it's the appropriate permit under which each of these campuses should operate. And I think big picture, when it comes to how we measure emissions, and I'll defer to others if this is not correct, but I'll just say that we measure emissions per the requirements of the permit at the source, and that measurement and that reporting is pretty stringent. So we have to report pretty frequently to MDE how it is that we are measuring at the source. And then once we get close to our permitted limit, then that reporting becomes more frequent and more stringent.
Yes. AT, could you please come off mute and ask your question?
Yeah. Here.
Okay, so that's fine. Casey Day.
Good evening. My name is Casey Day. I am a 31-year educator here in Frederick County and a candidate for the Board of Education in this election. I taught at Carroll Manor Elementary School for half of my teaching career. I spent 15 years there. My children were CMES and I know the community very well. This project adds, as we know, an additional 99 large diesel generators right behind the school. And these are, of course, not the only ones, as people have mentioned before. Unfortunately, our students, our children, do not experience pollution one permit at a time. They experience the cumulative effects of all of that. The children here will experience this project every day, not as numbers on papers and things that we argue about, but as cumulative noise, as emissions, as testing activity, and as industrial infrastructure surrounding their school and their learning environment. Children, unlike you were talking about looking at testing around their school times, elementary children are outside every day, almost all day, on and off. There are children outside on the playgrounds, recess, PE, arrival, dismissal, other outdoor activities. They breathe more rapidly than adults, especially when they're active. And many of our students already struggle with asthma and other respiratory problems. I'm also concerned because Carroll Manor is at its core an older school building. I was there during the construction of the addition, and the HVAC system was not replaced. Older systems can't handle the additional filtration and things that cannot be quickly or inexpensively retrofitted overnight with advanced HEPA filtration systems. So as an educator, I also want to talk about the importance of the learning environment, which is also part of the environment. Research has shown that chronic industrial noise impacts concentration, stress levels, and students test and learn at lower levels in situations like these. It's because students can't simply tune it out over the course of a school day, day after day after day. I won't talk about our specialized populations there because we've already heard about that from Delegate Miller, but industrial compliance standards are not the same as the optimal learning environment for our children. So I'm asking MDE for stronger protections before you allow this to move forward. Why have fence line real-time air quality monitors not been provided for the school? And why has there not been a requirement for additional berms and vegetation barriers to protect them from the noise? Why is non-emergency generator testing done after school hours with collaboration with the county? And where is the evaluation of all the cumulative impact on the students? Isn't that the job of the Department of the Environment to protect our environment? Why was CMES provided a STEM lab to distract the community instead of providing improvement to the HVAC system and the aging windows and doors to protect our children? This burden should not be borne by the school system. This project should not continue until we have the monitoring, response plan, and infrastructure requirements to ensure that every student and staff member at CMES will not be harmed. Thank you.
I'd love to get those questions answered. On the table on my left hand. Okay, how are we doing online? Excellent. Okay, so after Hope and Roger speak, then I'd like to call up Tiffany, Frank Holloway, Dr. Mary Kessling, Kathleen Cunningham. Yeah, excuse me. And yeah, and then I will call up two more, the last two after that. Okay, so for the people online, do you want to turn that over? See, that's our camera right there. If you want to turn that sign to face so people can see what you're showing. Okay, there you go. Well, don't do it, but you want to get everybody. So here you go. Just need to prop it up. There you go. Oh, okay, good.
Okay. Most everything I wanted to talk about has been said. I do want to reiterate on fine particulate matter. It's very, very small. It's microscopic. It can travel for hundreds of miles. The problem we have here in Frederick County is that we are non-attainment for 8-hour ozone. Ozone in and of itself is very problematic because of asthma. Just the asthma costs alone are 20 billion, maybe by 2028. You add diesel particulate on top of that with all the other chemicals, it just makes things 10 times worse. Why put a monitor at the post office when the school is right next to this thing? What's going on? Do you people know your job? Sam told you what it was. I feel like you're working for them, not us. We are Frederick County, Maryland, not them. We need a clean sweep of our current administration. They are doing what Governor Moore tells them to do or not to do. He needs to go. Trone, who was the one that came out here when they poisoned Tuscarora Creek, day one, and said, oh, it's just a bump in the road. Fitzwater, who is BFF with Moore, Young, Brad Young, not our wonderful Karen, Senator Young. I wouldn't blame him either. Renee Knapp, our resident. Yes, thank you. Carter, and our clowns. Well, Duckett's running unopposed, but anybody in District 2 that wants to write in a good person, Betty Law. She's smart, she's capable, she cares, and she can't be bought. Vote in the primary. Vote out every incumbent. Thank you so much. Sorry.
Thanks. Oh, I'm already running. Thank you for staying past 8:30. I appreciate that. That was not a good idea. And I appreciate that the legislators and county council, present company excluded, have put you in a bad position. I would encourage you to look at your options for cumulative impact, because that's real. It's absurd that you reject the project years ago and then you're approving 4 that are just under limit, I mean, or more. I mean, it's terrible. I would also, their paperwork said, well, we'd love to do renewable diesel, but it's not available. It's available if you pay enough for it. And I would encourage you to consider the environmental impacts, including the local air impacts of renewable diesel over fossil fuel diesel. They brought it up, so I would like you to look at it, please. It's unfortunate, you know, where it's going to be convenient for them that they can blame any health effects on the aluminum plant, but there it is. Please consider how we can tease out the differences. And overall, I'd say we're overbuilding these things. We're overbuilding these data centers. We're building them like crazy, and we're not doing it for convenience, for Google Map searches, or for, you know, we're doing it to replace people with automated mediocrity. We're doing it for surveillance. That was what I had written down here. For surveillance, for control, and for war. And it's not for the public good. So we don't need these things. So cancel them, get rid of them. Thanks.
So Tiffany?
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Tiffany Grant. Every single decision we make in this county has a human receipt. And tonight, I'm not looking at tech specs or zoning maps or economic projections. I'm looking at our families. We are standing on the precipice of welcoming massive Amazon data centers into our backyard. And yet, if you ask the fundamental question, the question that keeps mothers and fathers up at night, we are met with deafening silence. What is the evacuation plan? This isn't a new question. We have asked for transparency. We have asked for logistics. And time again, this critical safety issue has been completely ignored, swept under the rug, and treated as an afterthought. It has not been addressed, not by the developers and not by the officials who are supposed to protect us, not by Amazon and not by MDE. And because of that neglect, our community is feeling a heavy, exhausting mix of emotions. Our families are deeply angry that their voices are being tuned out. They're frustrated by the lack of transparency, but beneath that anger, if we're completely honest, people are frightened. They are genuinely afraid. Because if there is a catastrophic failure, an infrastructure collapse, or a hazardous emergency at one of these high voltage, massive scale facilities, what happens to our babies? Think about it. Our toddlers tucked into classrooms at local daycare centers, our children sitting in Frederick County classrooms. Who is getting them out? By what route? How fast? And what about our aging seniors? Our grandmothers, our grandfathers living in nearby neighborhoods, some with limited mobility, some who don't drive, some who rely on life-saving medical equipment. If the grid fails or if a crisis forces an immediate evacuation, what is the plan? Okay, so I'm gonna ask this real quick. Please, please. Others have been given. I'm just asking with grace and dignity, please. We cannot afford to figure this out after the alarm starts sounding. Smart growth isn't just a buzzword about preservation, it's dignity by design. We are being asked to trust tech giants with our landscape, but I refuse to gamble with our children's lives. To Amazon and to our county leadership, the demand is simple and non-negotiable. Show us the disaster plan. Show us the evacuation routes. Prove to us with absolute certainty how you will protect the most vulnerable amongst us. Until we see a bulletproof, comprehensive emergency strategy, this project cannot move forward. We will not move forward. We will not give permission to build on foundation of uncertainty, and we will not compromise the safety of our families for corporate expansion. The safety of our community must come first. With the specific county evacuation plan in place, what is the protocol? Please and thank you.
Tiffany. Can I ask if you would put all, you wrote the notes, did you send them to me? I surely will. I really want to get everything awesome.
Let me know how I can do that.
My card's on the table on the way out, has my email.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, thank you very much.
you.
How you doing? My name's Frank Hollowa. This gentleman here, you said current technology is what it is. Do a history. We learn from history. Do you know who Rudolf Diesel is? Do you know? He invented the diesel combustion engine in 1893. That's 133 years ago. You're using technology that you say it is what it is. That's 130 years old. But then you contradict yourself and you said, well, we're really progressive, Amazon. We're looking at other solutions. 1993, it's true. Rudolf Diesel, clean energy, renewable energy, solar, wind, it needs to be looked at. Karen Lewis-Young made some great comments, and she found pieces of information that we all can find, and respectfully you can find. The impacts of benzene, arsenic, oxynitrates, the diesel fumes cells lead to cancer, long-term exposure to diesel particles, cancer risks, toxic, lung cancer, long-term exposure, diesel, irritate eyes, throat, lungs, damage, lungs, headaches, nausea, exposure, cancer. In the last sentence, because children's lungs and respiratory systems are still developing, they are more susceptible in healthy adults to fine particles. Exposure to fine particles is associated with increased frequency of childhood illness and can also reduce lung function in children. Now, let's just say half of this is true. Give us half of that. You guys remind me of big tobacco. You guys are too young to remember. You remember. You're allowed to smoke on a plane. You're allowed to smoke. And society realizes that secondhand smoke wasn't good for you. But big tobacco had the money, and then they had politicians probably. And it took years and decades to finally, in 2008, for Maryland to finally say, you can't smoke in certain areas because it's harmful. Okay, you need to catch up with this. I get it. You guys are doing this 99, 99, 99 piecemeal thing. You've heard, I get there's a loophole. You need to recognize that there is a risk. Half of this is true. It's a risk. What I'm afraid of, 30 years from now, one of your kids that might be going to Carroll Manor School, he's going to be 25 years old, he's going to go to a doctor, and a doctor is going to say, you're the 5th person that has lung disease that went to Carroll Manor Elementary School. Your child just went to Carroll Manor, he has lung disease and he's 25, his lungs didn't develop. We have the information just like secondhand smoke. You've heard the information. I don't want to hear every other day, every other week, 10 hours, this hours. Exposure is exposure is exposure is exposure, just like cigarettes. We finally learned that secondhand smoke was bad. You know that's bad. Please don't do this. Please.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are 20 minutes past our hard stop of 8:30. The church has been very kind, but we have to leave. I want to thank everyone who came out. All of you who might have had other questions or comments, please grab my card on the table on the way out. I want to hear all of your comments. Fill my email box, and we will get the answers to you that we can get to you. And I really, again, appreciate you all coming out tonight. Thank you very, very much.